alongside Mike Johnson, Jeff O'Neill, the insider Darren Dreger, and Craig Button joins us from Calgary. Mike Johnson and Craig Button have been projecting this team for feels like a decade now, and finally we get to see exactly who is on it. And it's exactly what the insiders projected on Tuesday. Every single one of these players, Dregs and CJ and Pierre LeBrun, had named. We've highlighted the players that they've already named. And by the way, these are not line combinations by any stretch. We've just put in wingers for right now. Possible line combinations, but definitely not definitive. Of course, some of the questions at the bottom of the lineup. Seth Jarvis ends up as the 13th forward. Sanheim, the 7th defenseman at this point in time. Craig Button, I mentioned all the projections you guys have done. Obviously, a few changes from the guys you've had on there, even up to your last projections. When you look at this roster, what comes to mind?
The first thing that comes to mind, James, and this is a truism when you wear the maple leaf in international competition. People look at the roster and they'll debate it, they'll argue it. For Team Canada, it's simple. Either you win or you don't, and you're going to be judged on that. They've spent a lot of time trying to figure out what would give them the best opportunity to compete for first place in this tournament, the best on best tournament since 2016. So, you know, we know the top end, we know the superstar parts of it, but as they try to fill out the rest of the roster, there's no question that they had eyes towards the USA and Sweden. And certainly you can see where they form part of their team in different areas to try to give them the best chance not only to win, but to understand where we might be a little bit weaker, where we might not be as strong, and then try to fill in around that. I think specifically of the blue line, Colton Parayko, a big, strong defender. They want to protect probably the greatest weakness for Canada, which is the goaltending.
I always get leery about building a team with the opposition in mind, instead of just building the best team that Canada could make and make them respond to how you want to make it go. But I think the one thing that was clear was that they were not taking the 23 most talented players that are Canadian that are eligible. They were taking the 18, 20 best skaters they could put together to make the best team. And that means guys further down the roster, which is Sam Bennett to bring some physicality and Cirelli to play some defense and Parayko to play defense. They did try to build a team, not just the most talented skaters.
Whenever I think of a team, I always think of like when Pittsburgh was good winning cups. I'm like, Crosby's going over the boards and then Malkin. That's pretty dangerous. When you've got McDavid and then McKinnon and then Sidney Crosby and then after that it's Braden Point, that's the best of the best and as good as it gets. And then they have the intangibles. When you think about guys like Konechny and different guys down the lineup, if you go to them like Sam Bennett and say, can you give me 8 or 9 minutes tonight? That's it. That's all you're going to maybe get. Can you bring energy? Can you kill penalties? And do things that you're not normally going to do. Seth Jarvis, can you be a cheerleader? I had to do that way back in the World Juniors. I lied and said I'd be happy to do it. These guys are going to do the same thing. Everyone hopes so.
So obviously, as the guys talked about Dregs, they pick role players for certain situations, wanted to build a true hockey team instead of an all-star team. But what else went into the process of selecting these guys?
Right. When the management group got together initially, they designed the type of team that they felt that they needed to be, that they wanted to be. And that meant that you couldn't just have one-dimensional players. Obviously, there had to be a balance between the skill and the competitiveness of this Team Canada roster. So versatility matters a whole bunch. Obviously, all the centers on Team Canada aren't all playing center. You've got to be able to play the wing. You got to be able to play center. If you're a defenseman, you need to be able to play both sides. And as Pierre LeBrun talked about last week on Insider Trading and looking at Team Canada's goaltending, let's not be so sure that it's going to be Bennington or Hill at the end of the tournament.
Who's
it actually
hottest?
could be Sam Montembeault. Depends on who's the hottest. Yeah.
Well, it is the #1 potential Achilles heel for Canada. Are these three or one of these three good enough for Canada to win?
Absolutely good enough. 100%. Any of these three guys in one game could play well enough to win. Now, having said that, are they as strong as the goaltenders from the other countries? No, they're not. And I think everyone would know that, even though Binnington and Hill, of course, have won Stanley Cups. Montembeault's won a world championship. If it's me, though, I mean, I want the best goalie. None of these guys are Carey Price or Marty Brodeur or Patrick Waugh, that no matter what, they're our guy.
Yeah.
I just want the guy who's playing best. Whoever's Canadian who's playing the best, get him in net, and that guy will be good enough. And that's where I wonder, Logan Thompson, who probably has been the best Canadian goalie in the NHL this year.
In your mind, he should be on there.
He was on my team, so yes.
Craig, same question with goaltending.
Yeah, well, I'm going to make 2 points here. Number one, the overseer of this team, Doug Armstrong, he knows Binnington. He watched him win a Stanley Cup. One of the assistant coaches, Bruce Cassidy, watched Aiden Hill win a Stanley Cup, and Hockey Canada watched Sam Montembeault win a World Championship. So they have a comfort level with the staff that they have in place, with the goaltenders there. I don't know who's going to be the starter. I think it's going to have to come down to who is playing the very best. But there's no clear-cut guy, and we know that this is not a Carey Price, Roberto Luongo, Patrick Waugh, Eddie Belfour, whoever you want to name through it. They don't have that. But what I would say on my second point is, just get in there and do what you're capable of doing. You shouldn't have to stand on your head, but don't be subpar.
And for the people out there, James, that think, oh, they've got McDavid, they got McKinnon, Marner, all this talent up front, who cares about the goaltending? If you remember that team that went to Sochi, there was a lot of tight hockey games. It was like their idea was to try to win 2-1.
1-0 final.
1-0 final. They had to have that goaltender back there. So which one of these three guys is going to do it, there's probably going to be times where they got to get the job done.
And Dregs, in the selection of goaltending, they were specifically looking for guys that didn't give up the softie.
Yeah, don't give up a bad goal for that point. Exactly. I mean, the expectation is because of, the detail work that this group should be able to embrace in the Four Nations face-off. You can't give up that bad goal because it could be very, very costly. There shouldn't be runaways in this tournament, given the quality of the opposition that you're going to play, but also the history of Hockey Canada matters in every position, not just goaltending. So we look at Sam Montembeault and you wonder, should have been Logan Thompson. That men's world championship, I think that boosted his stock for sure.
I've watched all these guys play, and to suggest that they don't give up bad goals, factually untrue. That's just not untrue. So I get the comfort level. I understand you're part of the management team. There are your goaltenders. I get that. But they haven't been the best goalies for Canada this year. I think for this tournament, because there is no Carey Price, respectfully to the guys there, I just want the best guy.
Yeah,
I don't know if he's there.
That's why management hated the idea
they want
of having to submit on December 2nd with all positions, but especially the goaltending.
Well, there's probably going to be a goaltender summit anyway, and if these guys don't get it done, there'll be a real big one.
In this country, we tend to, the first thing, we look at the roster for 10 seconds, and then we start thinking about who are the guys that could have been on the roster that aren't on the roster. You mentioned Logan Thompson, but Craig, is there one most glaring omission in your opinion above all others?
There could be a couple. I'm going to say Nick Suzuki. I think Nick Suzuki is a superb player. I think that he can play defense, he can play offense, he can play in a lot of different. Jeff talked about versatility. Versatility is really important, and Nick Suzuki has that. And, with all due respect to Seth Jarvis, Nick Suzuki, in my mind, is a better player. And he can give you more in more areas of the game, and I think he's shown that time and time again. To me, that's a big omission in my eyes.
It is interesting that the 13th guy, if that is Jarvis, is a winger. Yeah. You think you'd want to send him in there for versatility in case something else happens. But the one maybe omission for me is that if Colton Parayko is on this team to be a shutdown, physical, right side, right shot defenseman, why not take the best physical, right shot, right side defensive defenseman in the league? That's Chris Tanev. He's Canadian. He's eligible. If you're going to take a specialist who's a defenseman who only needs to play 8 to 12 minutes and maybe finish a game off or kill a penalty or eat a puck, Chris Tanev is that guy. So to me, if you're taking a specialist on defense, that guy is clearly the guy to take.
Western Canada won't be happy, Edmonton in particular. Zach Hyman, who a lot of your projections were right next to Connor McDavid. He's one of those guys that was either going to play on the first line or he's not on the team. And then Mark Scheifele in Winnipeg as well, who's got off to a
Even Evan
great
Bouchard, watching him play in the playoffs last year for the Edmonton Oilers, you're like, that guy is controlling the play out there. But Zach Hyman, you always saw him connected to Connor McDavid on every sheet, every projection you guys did. And it looked right in a competition, a tournament like this. Zach Hyman could be so effective, getting pucks, scoring goals, being a pain. He'd be a perfect player. It just didn't go his way to start the season.
Yeah, I mean, I would look at Scheifele. I mean, there was some talk about Adam Lowry, who you could see being a depth guy, right? What about John Tavares, the versatility there, power play, penalty, kill? He'd be happy with that 13-forward role. But I think most are going to look at the omission of Zach Hyman, the relationship, the chemistry that he has, obviously, with Connor McDavid, and the fact that you need dogs who are going to drag you into the fight. And certainly, Zach Hyman has a history of being able to do that.
Craig?
You just touched on it with respect, Jeff, to Evan Bouchard. Evan Bouchard, you used the term controls play out there. After Makar, he's the second best power play guy. I mean, the things he can do on the ice. And when you look at what Evan Bouchard has done, his overall game, I don't think enough people watch Evan Bouchard and understand that he's a good defensive player. In the 60 games or so and the playoffs last year when Chris Knobloch took over, Edmonton was a top defensive team. They're a top defensive team this year. Their goaltending has made their defensive play not look so good. That's not the case. And Evan Bouchard would have been on my team.